let's start with editorial product, what we're producing. I'm a hater of the word content. I know that's not very popular, but I always feel it's a business term and a way of thinking about the journalism as this thing you produce to make money off of, which is, you know, sort of the never the way I wanted to ever think about journalism. So you'll forgive me if I don't use that word, but you're free to. So who would like to start for us? Maybe one of my seated folks, and you don't have to go in this order. Francis, do you want to come up? Yeah, whatever you want to talk about. And then from this, others should come to comment. If you hear her saying something, get up and come.
Well, I'm a former daily newspaper reporter, so for me, content, even though
and
you
say where you're coming from.
Oh, my name is Frances Dinkelspiel. I am a co-founder of BerkeleySide.com, which is a hyperlocal in Berkeley, California. We're less than 2 years old, and I'm a dyed-in-the-wool reporter. So, you know, for me, the heart of the site is the stories that we produce and the news that we're able to uncover. And we do mostly all original content. We do a little bit of aggregation, but most of the time we have the 3 co-founders reporting news, our interns reporting news, and a host of community contributors reporting news. And we do everything from the hardcore sort of investigative stories. This year we had a series of gun incidents at the local high school. There were 7 students caught with guns. 1 was fired. Fortunately, no one was hurt. We did a lot of examination of what went wrong there. So we do some hard news, but we also do a lot of food. Berkeley is the center of the food universe to some degree with Michael Pollan and Alice Waters. And people love our food stories, and so we do things about taco trucks pulling up to this neighborhood and bringing people in, you know, new farms that are opening up. We try to run the gamut between hard news and less serious news, and we think that one of the things about hyperlocal I think that's interesting is people really want to know about their communities, but they also want to have fun and be able to embrace their communities. And I think that's one of the things that this kind of site can deliver. It has the serious news, but it's able to celebrate all the successes of a community. And people really respond to that.
Thank you. Jay, take a mic.
Just explain how your community contributors work, how you give them assignments, how they return those assignments, like what's the workflow like?
So the question is how our community contributors work. Well, we have different tiers of community contributors. Sometimes we have people who live in a neighborhood who want to write a story about something in their neighborhood that's not really a hard news story. And they'll generally pitch an idea and we'll say go for it, and they'll send it to us, and then we will, you know, edit it and try to improve it. That's sort of the lowest level of contribution. Then we have people who are sort of, you know, aspiring journalists. We have a series of interns this summer from local colleges and some from high schools. And they, that works more like a traditional editor-reporter relationship. We will mostly assign stories for them to go out and give them some time to do it, and they'll come back and they'll write it and rewrite it. And then there are a lot of professional reporters also, in the Bay Area that do contribute things. Judith Coburn, for example, who wrote for the Village Voice for a long time, she's done some pieces for us. So it really runs the gamut. The one issue that I'd love to talk about this weekend is how do you keep community contributors? Because what we find is people come in, they work with us for a while, and then they sort of go elsewhere. And I know that the Sacramento Press does a lot of work retaining community contributors, and we've had less success in that area.
Are you paying them?
Yes, we believe in paying our contributors. The founders don't get paid very much, but we do pay for our reported pieces.
Even the community contributors, like the neophyte reporters?
No, actually we don't. But often they will sort of evolve into doing more reported pieces.
Someone else? Please, come on up. And tell me your site.
Sacramento Press.
.com?
.com. David Watts-Barton, I'm the editor-in-chief. We also have community contributors. That's sort of the idea originally when it started, was it was going to be all community contributors. And we very quickly learned that that wasn't a really good basis, because we needed to have professionals, people who, number one, we needed content every day, and there was no guarantee that it was going to even come in. And then we also wanted to have some people who knew what they were doing to provide sort of a model for some of the people who wanted to be community contributors or who wanted to be journalists but didn't really have very much experience in it. We have a very different, it's a very different town than Berkeley. We were talking about earlier. we actually have pretty good retention of our community contributors, and I think a large part of that is because we have somebody whose job it is, who's on staff, whose job it is to work with the community contributors all the time, every day. And she goes on, she also goes through the site, because we have a different, we don't curate the site, we just take whatever comes. So I have 3 staffers, they write things, but then also we have a lot of people who stories will just sort of appear on the site. And if you scroll down, you can see this is what we lay out every night. And then below the second ad, these are the stories that come in. And so they just pop up there. And they say when they came
Unedited?
in. Unedited. We offer editing.
Wow.
Yeah, but what's been really interesting about that is that people actually take the responsibility seriously. We very rarely have profanity. We very rarely have personal attacks.
Do you have a template, like a template that they use to fill this out, or they just send you a story?
Yeah. I mean, if you want, I could show you how it works.
Yeah, show us.
If you want to click up on the top. See, but looking right here, some of them, some are staffers. Some is Steve Maviglio is a longtime political operative in Sacramento who works for the mayor.
So where do I go?
Okay, so go up. Well, geez, got to log in and sign up. Yeah, log in and I'll
You want to log in?
yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to, it's David Watts Barton.
Uh-oh. You have to change it then. David Watts.
Well, that's just that's my name.
Can you want to come in and put in your password?
Barton. There you go.
Okay.
Here, I'll do
You
my
come do
password.
it. Yeah. Everybody, close your eyes.
I just think it's just dots, right?
Yeah, it's dots.
Okay.
You're good.
There we go. So then you click on Write, and you can click on Write New Article. And it comes up, and these are my storylines. We have storylines, which is one of the features on the site
Cool.
that isn't used very often, but I can show you. I mean, I don't want to take a lot of time doing this, but you pick one of your storylines, which is one of our functions, and then you go down, you make a title, and then you go to the content, you fill in the content, and then scroll down further.
Okay.
And this is brand new. We just started. This is disclosure. So we have some set disclosures. So anybody who's already done a disclosure, every time they sign up now, their disclosure pops up automatically. We ask people to tag it. We suggest a bunch of tags, so you can just click on one of these tags, or you can add your own tags, and you can add an image.
Wow.
You can upload it from your site. Then you hit preview, and you can look at how it's going to look on the page, which we don't have. There's not much there. So,
right.
but that's
so
that'll come up, and it has your name and the whole deal on the
publish.
tags. Then over here on the right, once the story is up, we can look at a story that's already established.
One that's on the
Yeah,
blog.
hit the button.
Yeah.
Yeah, just click
Okay.
on one of these.
Okay.
And over here, people can. This is about the rail yards. Is a huge undeveloped property right in the middle of Sacramento, that's been working on for years. And so what happens then is when you go down to the bottom, you can go down to the bottom, and so so you can comment on the story. Then people can give a thumbs up, a thumbs down to the comments. They can reply to the comment. If you have you can put a picture in, and so I'm all ready to go there. Then if you go back up to the top, over here on the right, we also have, you can share it, you can rate it in the community, you can flag it. So we have flags for if it's offensive, it's a duplicate, or if it's spam. We do get spam, but it's amazing how little we actually do. People actually really do respect the site. Yeah.
Tim, you need a mic.
No, that's all right. I can speak up. Do you insist that people submit under their real name?
Yes.
Like Warren Buffett?
Right, yeah, although he hasn't actually submitted yet, but we...
Buffalo News, that was one of his edicts on the online.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we do. You can comment under a handle, but you have to use your real name. And we also have this thing we were talking about last night when we were having drinks. Next to Suzanne's name, there's a quill. That's a badge.
This?
Yeah, click on that, and then we have all these different badges. So this is a badge for editorial staff, and these are all the staffers. So if you see that, you know that person is a staffer. We have a whole bunch of badges. I go click on the View Identity All Badges.
Where's that?
Well, try that, yeah.
Here?
Well, that's a RSS. Yeah, try that again. So click above the View Identity Badges there. I know I'm not pointing.
I see it. Okay.
So these are all the badges that we have. So we have for interns, we have contractors, we have staff who aren't editorial staff, media interns, and then if you go further down, those are all staff badges. Then we have government badges if somebody is from the, and then this one, verified community contributors. If somebody comes into our office, gives us their ID, signs up, and then we know exactly who they are.
That's great.
So yeah, and what we also, and then we also have badges. I think if you go further down, there's another group of badges that will tell people if they've had a front page story, if they've done 10 stories, and people love this. I mean, people who are really into it. And I think this sort of speaks to the question of retention of people, because you give them a little encouragement, you know, and they really, people love it. Yeah.
What platform is this, and will you sell it to other people?
Yeah,
he's asking what platform it is. I just want to make sure people can hear that.
Yeah, it's a proprietary platform. One of the founders of all three of the main founders of the company are developers. The head of our tech department is a developer, and they all worked on this starting in 2003, I think was when they started. We launched in 2008, so they worked on it for a long time. Very smart guys. And it continues to be developed. I mean, the badges started after I got there. A lot of these things, the disclosure just started last week. We do a release every 3 weeks. So we're always refreshing the site. We're adding, you know, the ability to do captions. And we're sort of making it up as we go along is one of the main phrases I use when we're doing things, because we really are. And we're just in response to how people do this. We have a team of 4 developers, and they're just working all the time on going back and refining things. I don't know as far as the long-term plan. I think the original plan was to sort of scale it, but what we're finding is that the scaling it thing is, it's so community dependent. You know, every town is different, so the sort of cookie cutter approach is not something that we're sure is going to actually work everywhere. You know.
We should talk more about this in the tools section, because we're also going to debut our similar project that's in development at that time. So this is fabulous. Anybody else working on something like this that's a community engagement device? Or any other comment on that? Maybe we can move on to other subjects. If not, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, at Nearsay, it's actually very similar, but I actually think yours looks much nicer. Trevor, our founder, is not here yet. I think he's coming later. But we have, it's very similar, where our contributors can log in and they get a dashboard, and it's very similar as well. And then you know there are also little like icons, whether you're a contributor, you're on our news team, or you're now someone part of our marketplace, who are the people that are paying for the profiles. So it's a similar format, and it's kind of like that Blogger where, you know, the setup where you put in the content and the title, and it seems to work well. And then our contributor stuff goes live to the site actually as well, and then the editors get an email and they email their stuff, but it seems to be going pretty well.
Has anybody worked on the question of knowledge transfer, beat transfer, where you're building a body of information, a reporter's beat subject, and then having to pass it on to others, as some of us who are in the student community and others, and also, as people have mentioned, contributors who come and go have to deal with, even reporters, paid reporters who have to come and go. David Dahl.
Hi, I'm David Dahl. I'm with the Boston Globe and a set of sites called Your Town. 50 sites in and around Boston. We have a system of town correspondents that we pay, not a lot of money, but we pay them. And by its nature, it's a system that people will stay with us for maybe a year or so and move on to whatever the next step in their career is. And what we've tried to do is done something that I think that has been done in a lot of newsrooms over the years, is essentially create a beat book or a source list for each community. As basic as this sounds, if you sort of format or template it with some categories about, starting with the sort of the structure of the town's government, and kind of go from there to major blogs or bloggers or community connectors in that town or in that neighborhood. Eventually the notion is that every succeeding correspondent builds onto that beat book, and then
do they actually keep it up?
To a degree.
Tell the truth.
I keep it up. I started. I transfer it, and then I hammer them when they've moved on to work at BaristaNet or the New York Times or something like that. In the closing weeks of their tenure, saying let's update it, and then the acceptance has been pretty good. So. So that's been helpful. It's been helpful on exactly what you're talking about, knowledge transfer.
Are you doing anything with the tools that we've seen, Sacramento's or Nearsays?
Not exactly. I can go down a couple of these things. I mean,
I'll call up a site.
Go to boston.com/Salem. I mean, my challenge here has been to essentially try to do what we learn on individual sites and try to push it across, as many as possible. I have 50 sites I've tried to manage, so, by its nature, they're going to be a little uneven. But if you go up to the top or middle of the thing, okay, history time. In looking for what, is called user-generated content in some circles, community contributions in other circles. We've tried to sort of find groups or people whose interests are aligned with our interests. And one of the places that we've gone is to nonprofits. Nonprofits want to get their message out. Nonprofits are generally, by their nature, not controversial. Nonprofits often are very enmeshed in the community. And so one of the groups, one of the areas we've sort of fished in is history societies. New England has a deep connection to history, to state the obvious, including our historic World Series victories. So we've kind of developed kind of this string of relationships with history groups, and they provide us with columns in some cases. Jay and I were talking about this last night. In some cases, there's a trove of photos in their archives that can be fodder for galleries that we curate. They are providing us with quiz ideas. There's a famous cemetery that straddles Watertown and Cambridge called the Mount Auburn Cemetery, which basically seems to be the resting place for anybody who's ever been famous. They're providing us with quizzes once a month about who's buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery, what are the connections, and so this isn't user-generated or community contributors in the same way that some of you all have sort of described, where they're covering news in the community. We have some of that. It's a little random, but if we can sort of create kind of a systematic way of going about generating contributions from people who are tightly connected with their community, it's another way to sort of skin the cat.
David, are you doing sports that way also?
Not exactly. Sports is, because of the way Boston.com and the Globe is structured, is being handled through our sports section, and we are linking to that coverage on our sites. We were talking last night about whether high school sports in particular is a big traffic driver, a big community connector. I believe it is. I think we need to do more. I mean, having spent a lot of Saturday afternoons on the sidelines at kids' soccer games, I mean, there's just tens of thousands of people who do this every single weekend, and so it seems logical that those are our potential readers and users, but we haven't sort of mastered it. What's happening is that individual bloggers across the board are doing different things, including high school sports. And so I think when the school year cycles around, we're probably going to be linking to some individual bloggers, particularly in the city of Boston.
Please come get a mic. Please, thanks. And also, if someone is without a mic and asks a question, would this person with the mic please repeat the question? Okay. Howard, please come stand over on this side. Thank you.
So, David, On the, I'll ask both these now so I can just go sit down. On the issue of the nonprofits, I want to see how your experience differs from mine, and maybe you have some advice for me, because it sounds like you're doing better getting the nonprofits participating. The one thing I've found is two things, actually. A lot of the nonprofits prefer to send us press releases and have it published under one of our bylines. It's like third-party validation. And then the other thing is the nonprofits are already sending press releases to the two other media outlets in town, so for them to post directly is like an extra step for them, and they don't want to take it. So we actually don't get a lot of user-generated content in that regard. Be interested in your thoughts on that. And then on the sports thing, and it goes back to our conversation last night, tens of thousands every weekend go to the soccer, but the area where I'm concerned is they're really only interested in their kids' soccer. They're not interested in everybody's soccer. So it seems like a much more niche audience. Anyway.
On the first one, we do not have it nearly as sort of a flexible or elegant tool as I just saw from Sacramento in accepting press releases and whatnot. I wish we did. We don't. So each and every press release, it sounds like you might happen to be doing the same thing, is essentially a cut and paste job, which is ridiculously time consuming, especially when you multiply it across 50 sites. So it's a little random. They want it. They like the coverage. They're hungry for coverage. I mean, you use the word validation. The validation that we've found, and that more importantly our users have found, is that when we go to a community, they're delighted that the Boston Globe and Boston.com are paying attention to their community. So, any exposure that an outfit like a nonprofit can get from us, is a win. So, I mean, that's kind of a non-answer. The second question, naturally, I forgot. Well, I guess I've come around to the idea that, I mean, I'm a news person too, and I believe that our differentiator is covering news, and I think that we do a terrific job, and I work for a great news organization. But, more and more, everything that I'm thinking about is what other role is it going to play in what we're doing? Is this going to be a community building exercise as well as a news gathering exercise? And so to get back to high school sports, it's not just about coverage, it's also about building the community. And we go, as we discussed last night, because of scale, because of our staffing issues, we might let the main Boston.com site or our regional sections or elsewhere, other parts of the Boston Globe to cover the individual game stories and whatnot. As we get closer to tournament time, the field sort of narrows, and then we will send people to those events, not just to cover the events, to take a lot of pictures, probably for galleries, but also to sort of like hand out stickers and use that as an opportunity to promote our site, because it's just townies at that point. If they're going to the Super 8, which is like this huge high school hockey thing at the end of the high school hockey season, it's just a great opportunity, and everybody cares deeply about their community. It's sort of like it's a built-in audience for us. We don't have to then set up the event. The event is already there for us, and we're there to sort of promote ourselves and be part of that community.
Come on up.
I just wanted to say one thing quickly about community, because I think what Hyperlocal does that's different than a traditional news organization, of course, is engaging community. And we have a really lively comment section, which of course is the most natural way to engage community. But recently we've been making good use of a program called Storyfy, which is a way to aggregate content across many platforms. We'll set up a hashtag, like we just did something for the 4th of July, and we gave it a Twitter hashtag, and we asked people to write about what they did on the 4th of July. We asked them to send us emails. We asked them to send us pictures. We asked them to sort of, write comments of our site. And we used Storyfy to draw together all the different things that people sent us, and we were able to create sort of a portrait of what happened in Berkeley on the 4th of July. And we've just started to use Storyfy, but what is so exciting for us is that it's a very low barrier for people to contribute and sort of create community. And I think that's what people really like about these sites, that it emphasizes the sense of community. And so that's a really great, easy, free tool, and it's very easy to do. And so, you know, you can just make a suggestion. The LA Times does this every week. They ask people to send in pictures of food that they've eaten over the weekend, and they aggregate it and they put it up on the food portion of their website every week, and it's a very popular.
We've had a request that people not only identify themselves, their publication, but also the platform they're working on.
Berkeley side is a WordPress platform.
Is everyone on WordPress? Is anyone not on WordPress? A lot, so you should mention that. Thank you, Francis. Other comments in this area, or maybe on some of our other topics?
I have a question for David.
Let's stick with the journalism here, because we're going to move to the other two pretty quickly. Yes.
I have a question for David. How do you balance the nonprofit contributions with potential revenue sources? And I'll give you an example. The Peabody Museum, for instance, in Salem, they could be a potential revenue source, or a local hospital that's a nonprofit could be a potential revenue source, or a university.
I guess the short answer is we really haven't confronted that yet. I mean, you know, I'm looking at the Peabody Essex Museum, or the other examples you cite as members of the community that are institutions that can and should be covered by our sites, that can and should contribute to our sites. You know, there is a wall between editorial and advertising. But let's be frank. I mean, we also work together to make this site work. So, haven't really confronted it yet. You know, we don't want to go down the road of basically swapping coverage. Of course, I mean that's explicitly prohibited.
Did you say swapping?
Swapping coverage for advertising revenue. So, you know, I mean, I guess another way to look at it is that if we are in that community and covering that community and covering, I think we actually had an item about, well, the bulletproof dog vest bumped the story off, but we had a story up about, you know, some American landscape art that will be presented at Peabody Essex. You know, I mean, so we cover stuff there. Not a direct answer.
Jim, come on up. Jim Schachter, New York Times, WordPress.
Jim Schachter, New York Times, WordPress. I have a question for the crowd. Has anybody had success engaging their community to dig into something complicated or investigative in nature? This is something Marianne and I have more or less thought of theoretically and have pulled off once or twice working with our partners on the locals, but wonder if anybody has, you know, dug out something that people didn't want known with the help of the community.
We've had, you know, modest success over 35 Cooper Square, the little wonderful federal house that was destroyed before our eyes across the street over the last months, where community architects and others wrote for us a more deep background. So I mean, that we've been able to do, but a big investigative piece or mining census data, not yet. Anyone has had success with that? Come up and tell us about it.
We had a tiny little bit of success. Actually, we have a lot of success with restaurants, which is the opposite of what you're talking about. Like, Eat a Hot Dog was, I think, the most successful one we had. Oh, yeah, Ross, RVA News, WordPress, like everybody else, I guess. But we did have a roundabout in our northern part of the city in Richmond that seemed like most of the neighborhoods wanted, but for whatever reason didn't get built. And there were lots of people who were very interested in the topic, sending me things. Hey, I was at the Civic Association meeting, Councilman X said this, stuff like that, that they weren't stringing together the piece, but were contributing important and unknown facts to kind of push the story forward. But I think that, you know, the people that care, there are like kind of community, someone last night on Twitter said community news people are weird. Someone said that? Anyone said that?
The weird wasn't scalable.
Weird wasn't scalable, but maybe it is scalable. I feel like there's weird people that are lovable and really like into what they're doing everywhere, and their job, I think, is maybe not to write the investigative story, but it's my job to find them and tie them together into the story. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, our office is really weird. Sometimes we just say things and they end up at the top of the site.
Joel, please.
Hi, I'm Joel Zuckerman from NPR, and for one of our projects, Project Argo, we use a customized WordPress with the Django backend for aggregation. And directly to your question, we have a site called commonhealth.wbur.org, and we're much less about hyperlocal as maybe hypertopic. Maybe that's a better way to put it. It's a pilot program with niche verticals that we've built out with member stations in 12 member stations. This one is WBUR in Boston, and it was sort of accidental at first. They wrote an aggregation post about something, a piece that appeared in New York Times Sunday Magazine about shaken baby syndrome, and it was somebody saying that that really the science on it is up in the air, and now there's a lot of confusion about it. And then these reporters that write this site got some back channel emails saying, wait a minute, this does not represent the body of evidence in the medical profession at this time. And so they asked if they could publish that, and he said, yeah, go ahead and do it. And then the whole comment string that started because of that was overwhelmingly in favor of the fact that yes, this woman is off her rocker, and then so they asked her to come back and comment on this site, and she declined, and it became clear that what had originally been published, and eventually the Times Sunday Magazine offered up a retraction, and then it became a much longer article about this topic. And so I think that was a case where, because of the community that these reporters have developed of real insiders, influencers in the medical profession, they were able to get more reliable information out there and dispel some of the notions that had come up. Great. So one other thing I want to point out about this site here is we built these sites on the notion of enterprise journalism and smart aggregation and community as a three-legged stool that support these sites. And that's how we're only able to have one person or maybe two stand up these sites in very specific topical areas that are critical to a community but resonate nationally. In this case, it's about health reform, cost control in Massachusetts, as they're the petri dish, so to speak, for the rest of the nation as far as that goes. And if you scroll down a little bit, in the right rail there, a little bit further, the latest links there is an example of what we've asked them to do is set up a Twitter account for this site with a very, very focused group of followers. And then rather than just put a Twitter stream in the right rail, what we're doing is we're interrogating the links that these folks send out and score them. And then that's the headlines that actually appear in that latest links area there. And if you look under the latest one of the headlines, you'll see who tweeted it out, and then the friends of those people, to give you, if you're interested in this topic, to be able to broaden your circle. And the idea is that these concentric circles of people. We could have called it +1. I'm not sure, but. So anyway, there are three efforts that we're really engaged in NPR. Again, it's not as much hyperlocal for us, but it's the notion that building up a strong local national network at a time where so many people, the newspaper industry obviously has, in many ways, most areas, but most cities pulled out of a lot of the watchdog journalism that they have been engaged in over the years, and there are real holes in that coverage. A lot of you guys are filling that need, but there's an awful lot of unmet need. And so there's Project Argo. There's a project that launches on Monday called, it used to be called Impact of Government, as we were formulating as a working term. Now it's State Impact. And that will be putting 100 reporters on the ground in 50 states, so 2 in each state. One will be primarily a blogger, one will be primarily a broadcast reporter, working together to cover not really incremental State House reporting. If we write about appropriations bills that making it through committee, we will have failed. It's much more about the impact of state government on our lives on a daily basis. And then the third effort is about building up capacity for local member stations' ability to have their sites as a real destination news site. And again, it's the premise that maybe one person or a group of people that spend part-time, part of their time on the site are able to stand up a local news site using the blog River News format. For Argo, I said it's WordPress, Django, and I should say that it will be open sourced by the end of the summer.
Is there an Argo site?
Well, that site that you were looking at, the Common Health site. And if you go to another one called Mindshift, mindshift.kqed.org, and that's the San Francisco NPR station. KQED. Right. So you'll see the very similar platform there, and there's a lot of flexibility. This is a site that's actually done very well. One of the things that she's done is sort of, she started to write for Huffington Post as well, taking a long blog post and give it to them, and they're sending traffic back to this site as well. So each site has been a bit of an experiment to find out what works and how they can gain traction.
Brooke, could you go back to the medical site? Sure. So I like this idea of hypertopics. So this is healthcare in Massachusetts, right? Okay. So the idea is to not only cover that topic, but to engage the very large number of people who have a lot of knowledge about this, right? And
That's
stake in Massachusetts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you have those two people who are the hosts of it, and so they're the pros.
That's right.
And then you've got the AMs, but they're really just AMs at journalism. They're pros at lots of other things.
That's right.
Or they're people who have a great deal of knowledge because they've been engaged with the healthcare system as patients or whatever, right?
That's right.
So, so if I'm one of those people who has a big stake, or I work in the healthcare system, or I just know a lot about it,
right,
and I see this thing, where's the portal for me to contribute? Like, how do I know what I can do for your site, and how do I find out like where to go and
there is a support button.
So but that's for financial support,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So where's the community portal part of this?
So I think our feeling on it is that there's no segregated talk amongst yourselves area. We don't have forums, bulletin boards, things like that. But that, traditionally, each post has, you've got the ability to comment on it. You've got the ability to contact each reporter. The reporters have developed individuals that they know that they can count on for contributions. Mindshift is one that uses a lot of guest posts, and they might just simply be from a teacher. The topic of Mindshift is, since it's in San Francisco, it's the intersection between technology and education, right?
How do they get to you? Like, if they aren't just commenting through a comment stream, how would they say, gee, I'd like to write about, or not?
Well, so a combination of a couple of different things.
One, you're asking, Jay?
One is just using the traditional blog tools of commenting and email and Twitter, that kind of communication back and forth. With our Seattle site, with KPLU in Seattle, it's Humanosphere.
What's it called?
Humanosphere.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, try trademarking names of sites and see what you come up with.
And what's the station?
KPLU.
KPL.
.org. Yeah. That's a site about global health, and again, it's locally very important to Seattle because of the Gates Foundation and UW and other that burgeoning global health industry that's popped up there. They held a teeny little forum on a rainy Tuesday night in Seattle about the topic of global health, and they had a couple of earnest experts and everything, and they had 750 people show up at $10 a head. And so when you talk about engaging your community, now, 750 page views a day is not going to help you out that much. But when you've got the influentials that are part of the site and actively contributing, that's when you have real power. And I wish I could say that it's perfect and that it works all the time. In fact, this site, it's one where there's a traditional newspaper reporter who's learned blogging, but the forum showed that I think the power of engaging influentials in the offline world, which is something that you I think wanted to talk about as well. And that's something we tried to focus on as well, get people to engage in people in the offline world, because then you can take that back to the sites themselves.
Let's move to that, because that's a great subject, I think, and a little fresher. Moving from the virtual to the actual, what's the balance, what's necessary. At the local East Village, which is only in its 10th month, as I like to say, don't smack the baby. We started a contributors council, and that was kind of an accident, because in the very, very early months of the blog, we were engaging something like 50 community contributors in various ways, and felt that we wanted to say thank you. So we just wanted to offer a dinner, and my husband cooked the food. It was very, very down home. We did it in this room with a beautiful square table. And I would say like about 30 of the contributors came, which was great. And we had no agenda except to say thank you. And out of that meeting, people would not leave the table. They stayed till almost 11 o'clock at night, wanting to engage, wanting to be part of the creation of the blog and the thinking about the blog, which was incredibly exciting, and wanting to engage with the big questions we were dealing with, because we do see this as an innovation lab, and demanded that we start doing this regularly. So we've now had 3 of these meetings, one every 6 weeks, and we'll continue to do it because it's a wonderful forum for getting really important feedback. The times comes, we come, and we really spend time on it. We've tried a table at a community festival. We've done that once. That was pretty much of a bomb because there was a deluge. But we will try it again. We have some other whack ideas that we might try to get out into the community in a substantive way. But I'd love to hear what people are doing, what works, what doesn't work. A lot of things don't work, and it's interesting to know. Last night there was a great deal of talk, Debbie, come up. There was a great deal of talk about events. And I'm thinking, events take planning, people, money. I mean, you can't just do an event. If you're doing flea markets, or you're doing, we're talking about an exhibition we want to do next spring. I think that'll be kind of exciting. We have the advantage of a university structure in the neighborhood. I wouldn't want to tote up what we're spending that we're not seeing or feeling, that we're just able to do because people are fabulous, like the people who organized this event today, who are NYU staff. We should say hello and thank you to them. Kate Panuska and Andrea Rosenberg and others who've been really amazing. Debbie, tell us some of the things. You've had 7 years of this, so tell us a lot. First of all, introduce yourself and your platform.
Debbie Gallant, BaristaNet, WordPress. Some of the most success, we are out in the world a lot. We just did the 4th of July parade, and if you go to our About Us page, you always see a picture of us with the 4th of July parade. Unfortunately this year, news broke just as, and I didn't see it until I got home, news broke just as the parade was launching at 11:03. The prosecutor's office put out a press release saying that there was a murder in Montclair, which I didn't find out till after I got home, and it was like, and somebody said, oh, somebody was going to the pool, said, oh yeah, I just read this on Patch. It's like, oh great. But we won at night because I didn't go to fireworks, and that's when the prosecutor broke the news of the arrest, so we scooped on that. But I think our most popular events have been election night. We also did one on the Palin-Biden debate. We had a party at a local pub that was super popular. We even had a contest, a Sarah Palin lookalike contest, and people. What was great about that is that we have people on both sides of the political spectrum who are commenters. People are really nice to each other in real life, while they tend to be not nice to each other on the page. Less successful was actual election night because the Republicans stayed home. They knew they were losing, and they didn't, so it was the other one. And then we also made this midterm elections sort of a virtual newsroom at another pub. And anyway, that's fun because it's an election night. There's things going on.
Do you charge for these?
No, we haven't. What we have done so far is we have bartered with a pub, and
for advertising.
For advertising, we give them advertising, and then they give our patron, our readers, free drinks and free food, or maybe they give them free food and they pay for drinks, or something like that. But generally it's just a party that we're giving. We have to start thinking about if there's ways to monetize this. So far it's been like we're generous and we're thanking people, and that's what we do.
Anyone else? Come on up. Maybe Melissa, we haven't heard from you yet.
Melissa
This is, wait, at
Bailey.
newhavenindependent.org
Yes.
or .com?
.org. They'll both get you there. So we're a hyperlocal news site all about New Haven, Connecticut. We've been around 6 years. We recently, over the last couple of years, started a series of civic dialogues, which have been a lot of fun. Our
Can we
best
see those?
one, yeah, if you search Ravitch, you'll find probably our most fun one.
RAVITCH?
CH, yeah.
Oh.
So what we did, New Haven has this big school reform drive, which has gotten a lot of national attention, and we have done a lot of coverage of it, just news stories. But we decided that we wanted to be more than just providing news. We wanted to be a home for civic dialogue about this. So we invited Diane Ravitch, the notorious educational pundit, who's quite critical of some of the main tenets of our school reform drive. And we got teachers and students and parents and everyone into a school one night. And we had this huge panel of like 12 different people who all disagreed with each other. It was a lot of fun. And then we had a panel separately of bloggers, so including the mayor and one of the state representatives and some local sort of educational analysts. And we had these sort of two simultaneous forums on stage. We had the, oh, you're not finding it?
You got site trouble.
Won't
work. Anyway, never mind. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I can send you the link later.
Okay.
But the basic point, I guess, it was our first big debut into, changing from reporting the news to hosting this forum that would sort of move forward the dialogue about our school reform drive. And it was a huge success. People just felt really involved. If they couldn't come, they were commenting in from home. And it was just a really exciting sort of moment for everyone, even though everyone disagreed a lot about the ideas behind our school reform drive. It was just a way for people to participate and kind of feel like they're part of something exciting in New Haven.
This is a little off topic, but I notice you use C-Click-Fix, which others have talked about. We tried it with no success at all because it doesn't leak to 311. So it's like after you say there's something wrong, they're like, what's next? Happens. But has anyone had good experience with it or bad experience with it?
So yeah, we were the first site, I think nationally, to adopt C-Click-Fix. They're right down the street from us in New Haven. Is anyone not familiar with
C-Click-Fix? Say a word about it.
So it's a community
it's right here.
problem-solving network site. You could click on the C-Click-Fix. You'll get a little more. So say you're biking down the street and you see a pothole. You go home or you take out your mobile phone and you identify there's a pothole on this corner. And then the local government in New Haven is on board with this. So they have watch areas and watch words. So if the Department of Public Works is monitoring for the word pothole, so if they see that, they actually, within a day, usually fix the potholes. I've tried it myself.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. But it definitely takes buy-in from the people in power. So, and they've actually had great success. They have our local utility company. They had graffiti on the utility boxes, and they got them to become a watcher. And so they will come wipe off the graffiti if you report it. And then I guess graffiti, trees down, anything like that.
The key is buy-in. The key is civic buy-in.
is getting commitment from City Hall to basically, address these problems. And they've said that it actually helps their workflow because instead of having people roaming around the streets looking for graffiti, they know, okay, today I'm going to address these 6 tickets on C-Click-Fix, and then their supervisor can track their progress and their efficiency.
Great.
Need to put back on our sidebar, but we used it very effectively in certain limited cases after a snowstorm because certain towns, we cover a few towns, have much better and much worse snow removal. So we were able to embed it in the map in a post and say to people, post on this now, tell us whether your snow has been removed and how long it took, what time it came and how long it took. And people really did click on it, and it was mapped on the map. because it, you know, you can have, it has a map widget as well. And it was great because, you know, people could really see where the snowplows were coming and where they weren't.
Great.
Yeah, you can create a widget for a specific problem, which since SeeClickFix is in our town, they did it for us in New Haven. They're like, oh, okay, we have this huge snowstorm, you know, the streets are unplowed. You just embed this map in the story. Okay. And we had a lot of success. There was brown water coming out of the taps. And, you know, I saw this at home, and I was like, oh, man, is this a story? And I went on SeeClickFix, and you see all these comments, and you could see across the town everywhere that was having the same problem. And that was really the only source of information. It was a time when, you know, the water company had terrible public relations. They weren't really telling anyone what was going on. But SeeClickFix was the only place you could actually identify the problem and, you know, realize that you weren't the only one facing it.
Great.
You said that your forum with Ravitch was a big success, right? So what is the notion of success you're using there? What is the thing you were trying to do that you felt this forum succeeded at?
I guess input from a lot of people, a lot of sort of, I guess, engagement would be the big word. But people, you know, feeling like, I guess this has been a school reform drive that has been sort of dictated by the mayor and has, you know, taken its sort of course, and a lot of people felt like they didn't have a say in it or a part in where it was going. So I think, you know, just the quality of the discussion that happened online and in person, and then the feedback that we got from people who were actually there. Right. So feeling...
So the success is taking an issue that had been dominated by a small number of players but affected everyone, and giving a much larger group of people a sense of participation in that issue, right?
Yeah, I would
and
agree.
You want that New Haven Independent to be a force for doing that.
Yeah, and I think also moving forward a dialogue, you know, and that may not be the way that the people are going to spin it, but advancing the sort of thinking around what this school reform drive means.
Right. So if you had this big success with the forum, now more people are engaged. So what did you do after that?
I mean, I think it informed our reporting and gave us new sort of contacts with teachers who maybe hadn't been participating in the site. Our readers are commenting among teachers and parents this year has been like through the roof. It really has increased, and they're emailing us with tips and, you know, video. There was a fist fight in the hallway, and we had like a sort of a cell phone video of it. So the sort of our relationship to our readers and to the people in the schools is really made closer by that event.
Right. So when you have an event like that, you're actually operating directly on the relationship between yourselves and readers as sources and commenters and so forth.
You're bringing them in. You're saying, we care what you think. Yeah. You're part of this.
And where did you hold it?
At one of the local high schools.
And they donated the space?
Yeah.
Cool. Others, any other comments of this nature, of events, virtual, actual? Let's stay on that topic. Jim, come on up.
Raise a slightly different topic that this
That's okay.
provokes. And this relates both to what's being described in New Haven and what you were talking about with NPR. My question is whether anyone finds themselves thinking that geography alone is not kind of a sufficient organizing principle for these projects. So that if it seems to me that a lot of places, a lot of sites, when you say it's hyperlocal, it somehow finds its way down to, I'm making a judgment there, restaurants and vacant storefronts. But then you have other examples of hyperlocal that are very much both hyperlocal and topic-based. From, you know, I would say Brownstoner is hyperlocal, and it's all about real estate. We're starting a thing in a month or so that's all about schools in New York City. And I just wonder whether any of you, but these don't have geography. Well, they do, but on a kind of a, to some degree, a head nod toward the geography. I wonder whether sort of the identifying of 1 or 2 or 4 core topics and making these sites as much about the topics, tapping into the expertise about the topics a la NPR in a community, and sort of building out from there as opposed to trying to boil even the small ocean of everything going on in a place, maybe as a way to engage the really engaged people in a community as either a starting point or an ending point.
I think we find that to be true because of the nature of the East Village, and we just simply have the riches of a very historic, urban, hip, multifaceted community that is as important as a tourist destination as it is as a local community. And I think that enables us to work through several of those topic areas, appealing to those different constituencies, as well as the very, very local stuff of stores opening and closing. But, opera, I mean, the topics are just vast, and we are able to do that. But I think it's location-based. In the end, it's because of who lives there and why they live there and what's located there and what businesses gravitate to there, and it's its own thing. Come up with the mic, please, Dave. No, because we can't hear you. No, please do. Come on. Somebody hand him a mic. No, we want you
I
to.
couldn't disagree with you more.
Okay.
No, I'd rather. I kind of think that hyperlocal is nice in paper form and idea-wise, but I think vertical is where the money is to be made. I'm Tim. I'm a contributor to the Hyperlocal East Village. But I think that if you look at some of the social impact issues that are out there, living with diabetes, there's a vertical community that is dying for not only the benefit of membership of a community of people that are living with diabetes or living with depression or basically any hobbyist. You can create purchasing groups, planning a wedding, create registration groups. And I think that hyperlocal is great in terms of the thought of it, but really where the rubber is going to hit the road in terms of communities are vertical, according to issue.
WordPress. I'm Mary Ann Giordano from the New York Times. I work with the locals, and I'm the editor of this new school site that we're starting. And I think that sort of addresses my opinion on this question. Jack Schaefer said hyperlocal doesn't work, but why can't we do both? Why can't people have more news and more of the kind of news that they want? I think it depends on the community. We found vast differences between Fort Greene and Clinton Hill and the East Village of what people are looking for and what they respond to. When we ran the local in New Jersey, that was a whole different group of people and different interests that they had. The levels of participation were different. The quality of the work was kind of different. Even See Click Fix, which we were just talking about, it worked beautifully in Maplewood, but it just doesn't work in New York City because here there's an alternative way to report your problems, 311. Our system, if we did See Click Fix, it just goes to 311 anyway. So it's just adding a layer. Also, a little bit back to See Click Fix. Some of the limitations of it is it's great when people say street light is out on this block, but when they're saying this intersection is dangerous and they expect us to get response to that when that's been an issue in the community forever, it's good for us as journalists to see that and to pick up on that and do stories about it, but it doesn't really give people that instant gratification either. But while I'm talking, while I have the microphone here, I want to talk about journalism because I think it's been really missing from this conversation today, and I do think that is that's the secret ingredient that determines whether a site is successful or not. And again, Jay, success is defined in many different ways, but I do think that that you can cover a community. Let me step back for a second. I think the reason that hyperlocal is popular now is because community newspapers or community bureaus were shut down or failed. And why did they shut down or fail? Let's admit it. We did lousy work. We didn't give people what they really needed. We wrote bad headlines. We just didn't make people feel like they had to get up every morning and buy that newspaper or look at that newspaper, look at headlines. And I live in Westchester, and little by little, Gannett pulled back, and now the only thing anybody looks at it for is the obituaries at all anymore. I mean, it just doesn't have anything else of value to people. So I really think that we have to keep focusing. As we discuss hyperlocal, we have to focus on the journalism, because if we are serving our readers and we're presenting news in interesting ways and not formulaic and not, you have to, everybody has to be able to look at your site and say, oh, I'm sorry to use this language, but I call it a holy shit story, and you need to have a lot of them. And that's one of the things that really is one of the determining factors that you could have all your opinions in the world, Jack Schaefer or anybody, but it all comes down to great journalism.
This dovetails there, and it may be a little bit different direction. We've talked a lot, particularly about Twitter and how we engage in communities, and now we've come around to kind of talking about journalism and community. And that was really, sitting here, one thing I really wanted to address. I want to suggest a book for anybody that's really interested in the community issue. It's called Dispatches from the Muck Dog Gazette. It's by a guy by the name of Bill Kaufman. When I launched the Batavian and moved to Batavia, well, I hadn't quite moved there yet, but when we launched the site, I had no idea who Bill Kaufman was and never heard of the book. It's actually a book about Batavia. Bill Kaufman is a localist. He really believes in local communities, and the subtitle of this book is The Struggle of a Small Community's Fight to Survive. And so while it's really about Batavia, it's also really about community and the importance of community. And I have a strong belief, even before I met Bill, that, and we've become good friends, which is great, the communities are the foundation of a free society. Our ability to interconnect to each other and to help each other and sustain viable communities is really important to a free society. So part of the reason that I do this and why it was so great for me to get out of the kind of corporate world and do this is my strong belief in local communities, small communities. I'm against both like big corporations. I think Walmart is a soul-sucking, community-destroying corporation, and stand strongly against those corporations. And so a big philosophy about the Batavian is both editorially to support community and advertising-wise. We really communicate strongly that we're here to support local businesses. And when we get into the money side, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about why that philosophy is important. So I wanted to just broach the subject as a philosophical aspect of why we do community. I think a lot of times we forget about why this is important. For me, it's not just about making money or building a company. It's about doing something I think is important to society, which also gets back to the journalism role. The other book I want to mention is Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. There's all kinds of charts in there that show the decline of community engagement from the 1960s onward. There's also a chart in there that shows the readership of newspapers going straight down. Almost identical graphs. The question is it a chicken or egg? When you look at the rise of corporate ownership of newspapers, and we talked about this at dinner last night, everything flows back to corporate headquarters. So you have less money to spend on the journalism of the communities. The newspapers become a lot less engaged in their communities, a lot less interesting to their communities. So I question, I don't have the answer to this, but I question whether it's the internet or a less engaged society that is causing a decline in circulation, or it's really, back to your point, the editorial content. So that's where I think the opportunity is for those of us that are concentrated on local news organizations, building local news organizations, is to bring that level of engagement back that newspapers used to have.
Thanks.
Just to take this issue of journalism in another direction, I mean, I think it relates to everything else we've been talking about, community engagement and all of, bring your little chart up there, Brooke, your agenda. You know, I think that, you know, journalist, communitarian, all these things, payment versus volunteerism. You know, we found that when we did good stories, we brought in more information. We brought in more people. It sparked, you know, people understood that we were there for them in a way that added to their information, their insight into their own community, and they wanted to be part of that. They really felt the community part of it, and it really was based on news. It was also based on hard news often, and so many of these sites are very, very soft, and that's because there takes a lot of resources to do hard news reporting. Even the police blotter is, you know, a huge undertaking every week, and everybody struggles with that, I know. But there has to be something there that makes the community want to participate. And at the core of it, Jim Schachter always says, what's your saying about the least amount of journalism? Did you say this last night and I'm repeating it? No. Because okay. You know, what is the least amount of journalism that you can put into these to make, you know, these sites successful? And I think that you can, the journalist is the catalyst. The journalist is not only the core of the site, but also the person that is reaching out to everybody else just by the quality of the work and the focus of the piece. So I think it's just related to, you know, the ladder of engagement, offline. All of these things are just related to that core. Anybody disagree?
Come on up, Debbie.
I just wanted to, if you know, could put up baristakids.com. One of the things I'm most proud of is, and it gets to the idea of a vertical, is we have a partnership with a site called Barista Kids. Yeah, that'll get it. And if you go in the search engine up there and type in the word Chiles, C-H-I-L-E-S. Yeah. Anyway, it was initially a site called Montclair Kids. And so it was somewhat a competitive site, but they really weren't making any money, and we went to them, and this was a very Jarvis-y kind of thing. We just said, let's partner up, and we can provide the brand name, so they changed the name to Barista Kids, and and they provide all, the reason I put up this story is if you click on that fatal accident involving Hillside, not bike related, so you can be, a lot of it is soft stuff. It's, you know, I know that Patch is doing it in a very deliberate and kind of cynical way, like do more stuff about kids and moms and, you know, super moms and everything. But this was really organically coming from the moms, and there's a service. And, you know, people want to know, what's the new craft store? What the hell do I do with my kids on a Saturday when it's raining? This was a little bit of investigative journalism that we did, and the byline is Bristonet staff, because the principal at this school is so notoriously mean, and all the younger people on the staff have kids that go to that school or are going to be going to that school, and they wanted me to put my byline on it, and I was like, I don't mind putting my byline on it, but I didn't write it. I did a lot of the editing, so let's put it up as Bristonet staff. But that story was, there was this teacher, a principal in this very liberal town who was not allowing anybody to bike to school. And these kids were wanting, this mom was biking every day with her kid to school, and the principal wouldn't let her park, or anybody park their bike in front of the school. And he kept referencing this death of a student 18 years ago. And I got a tip from somebody in Bike Montclair, which is a local advocacy site, saying, we heard that the kid wasn't killed in a bicycle accident. I gave it to our lifestyle reporter, who is really like a Martha Stewart type, but she went right into it. She went first to the archives of the public library, found the Montclair Times from 18 years ago, found out, sure, there was no reference to bicycle accident there. Secondly, she went to the police station, asked for a report from 18 years ago, waited, the next day the report came. And so we put out, it was summer already by the time the story came out. We never got a response from either the superintendent or the principal, and I have to file up and sort of demand that. But basically, it appears as if he lied. You know, I mean, why? I don't know. But you know, I think it's a real success story, and I want to sort of replicate it with some of our other areas, because they now get something almost like 40% of the traffic that we do, and revenue. I mean, they've really grown. They've really grown it. They're lower priced ads. They do all the editorial, and what we do is a revenue split. So we get, I think, 30% of the revenue that that site generates, and we give them all the back end. So, you know, anything that comes in with school stuff or kid stuff, they do. I don't have to assign it. I don't have to pay for it. Then they get the benefit of, you know, what we can bring. So,
That's great.
Yeah.
So you basically absorbed a site.
Basically absorbed a site, rebranded, and we consider them partners. So we don't dictate, we talk about things, and actually the split was more favorable to us, and we felt they were bringing more to the occasion, and we voluntarily gave them a bigger split.
And it wouldn't have been the same to just have a tab on Barista that was Barista.
There is a tab. If
But
you
I
go
mean,
back to Bristol, there's a tab. No, but we would have much less content. And
like this right here.
Yeah, that's it. That goes to the same site.
Uh-huh.
But you know, it would have been, you know, it's that much more content that our regular reporters would have to do. They're providing that content themselves, and they have little kids. You know, frankly, my kids are in college and out, and they have little kids, and that stuff, it lives close to them. And then when something comes across my desk and it's whatever, you know, some Eagle Scouts were just named or whatever, you know, I just, you know, forward it on. They take care of it. They're happy for it. Occasionally we will discuss what is a BK story, a Barista Kid story versus a Barista Net story, and you know, at the beginning there was some roughness about that because, you know, they wanted, you know, sometimes we wanted things for our content, they wanted things for their content, but now it's worked out very, very nicely. And I think I want to do that more with, same thing with pets. Pets, if you go, this is, if you go to our front page, we reunite a lot of dogs and cats with their owners, and if you go back to the home page, before we had this sort of magazine-y, if you scroll down the page, you'll see at the very bottom you have these different sections, pets, okay, and we kept that there because when we were on a blog format. You'll see, go back up to the page, you'll see what the old site looked like with the blog format. We see where it says classic? Mm-hmm. That's the site, because when we switched to a magazine style, people were anytime you switch your format, people will be very upset at you. And so we created that. But what would happen is sometimes, you know, everything is in order, and then all of a sudden the lost pet would come, and it might be after an explosion in downtown, and it would be up there at the top of the page. So we kept it, we kept a tab for it, and the pet lovers are you know, they're rabid. they check it every day, and we get the most, you know, comments on that. The way we did that was we actually, we don't write those stories at all, even the lost ones. We have a person who came to us who wanted to write pets. She's supposedly doing it on a revenue share, but she hasn't been able to sell, and she's still willing to do it because she's sort of theoretically the owner. And if we ever sell, she'll get some split of that. But she was, you know, so I want to really do that with. So
you've got pets, people, places, kids, deals.
Yeah, I really want to do it with. And we're going to have lifestyle there too. I want to really do it with the food, lifestyle, and real estate. Really bang out the real estate a little bit more too, and think about either doing it as a revenue share, but I think those are some of the growth areas.
So they are vertical in that sense.
Yeah.
Come on, David. We still have about 35 minutes. If there's anything we really want to drill down on, somebody tweet it or shout it out. I'm watching. Go ahead.
This is I just have to say, a really great experience being here and doing this, because it's interesting to see all the different ways in which you could do that. It never occurred to me to have a pet section, and yet pets are huge, right? We're a central city. We don't really have any schools, and we don't really have a lot of kids, because once people have kids, they move out of the central city. But the first, when I have 3 reporters, the first opportunity I had to hire a reporter, I hired a City Hall reporter, which, you know, it's sort of a default kind of thing, but you were talking about journalism and doing things like that, and I've been kind of struck on a lot of these. I haven't seen a lot of stories about city council, county board of supervisors, things like that, which is one of the main things that we do. It's not necessarily the best read thing that we do, but in terms of doing journalism, it kind of seems like the starting point, and it's someplace where we can beat the bee every single day practically, because we have somebody there every day, and she is, actually we just switched to a different reporter, one left, but the new one we have is fantastic, and she is all over it. And it's something that draws a lot of comments. The people who care about it are really passionate, and it feels to me, going back to sort of our responsibility as journalists is one of those things, is to be a watchdog. And a lot of the things that I'm seeing are kind of service kind of things, like the potholes and things like that, which we don't do as much of as we could. And I like that, the 311. I agree that adding the C-click fix, which I know the San Francisco Chronicle has done for a long time, does sort of bypass 311. We haven't really worked with that, and that's an interesting idea. I like that. But also sometimes just going and really looking at a lot of the city council people and holding their feet to the fire a lot more is something that our readers definitely like, and it does seem to be sort of a very traditional thing. The other thing is businesses opening. And I am curious about how much people's different sites cover the actual machinations of government, particularly right now, because at least in Sacramento, we're in a mess right now. We are California. I don't know how many people here from California. California is a mess, and every level of government is heavily in debt. And so covering it right now just seems like a really, really important thing to do. And I'm curious how many of the sites are actually focusing on that, and how that's working in terms of readership.
Someone like to respond?
I'm not going to talk about my site. I'm going to talk about somebody else that's not here. Ann Arbor Chronicle. They're not here, but I appeared with the owners, and I'm sorry I'm blanking out of their name if they're watching. Hello. But I appeared with one of the owners at a FCC panel in Washington, D.C. last year, and I was really surprised to hear how on their readership is almost entirely driven by government coverage. They cover every meeting in great detail, they told me. And he said that they get a lot of traction out of that, which I found really interesting. We cover a lot of government, but we cover a lot of other stuff too. To me, government's part of community engagement too, and we want to cover that. But like, if our site was up, you'd see the top story right now is about a lost dog. So, and by the way, I didn't mention earlier when I first talked last time, Howard Owens, the Batavian, and we're Drupal.
Oh, Drupal. All right.
You want to ask Howard? I'm Jay Rosen from NYU. I'm kind of a drag on the nation's economy. I don't do anything except make ideas. So, yes, I will, Dave. I want to go back to something Marianne said and that Jim also introduced, which is the quality of the journalism ultimately is the key to success. And in making that point, Marianne pointed out how companies like Gannett, which owns all the newspapers in Westchester County, have become just almost like vanishing presences in their community because they've just done less and less and less. And to get out of that trap of like shrinking coverage because resources are shrinking, I think it's useful to employ this little trick. It's not really a trick, it's like an image of what would 100% coverage look like, right? Instead of starting with the limited resources you have, I only have 2 reporters, right? It's just me. How am I going to cover the town? Instead of starting with the small, start with the big, meaning what would it look like if we covered everything in this community? And if you begin there, right, if you can map that, if you could chart it, if you could almost like draw a picture of it, if you could put it on the wall, 100% coverage, right, and start from that, rather than the very limited resources you have, right, then trying to get to 100% would force you to innovate. So I'm an advisor to a newspaper company, Journal Register company, which is trying to make itself into a digital-first company. And we have this idea lab, which is people from throughout the company who have promising ideas that can help make the transition to a digital news company. And so I spoke about this idea about 100%. How can we do 100%? rather than just the paltry amount that we're covering. So one of the editors there was a sports editor in New Jersey. And he listened to this, and he's got the idea, okay, let's cover every high school football game in South Jersey. How could we do that live? Right? Every game. Well, that's several hundred games. His sports staff is 2. Right? So the only way that he can do it is get people who are at the game, who have cell phones, to tweet the scores at 4 intervals, and we'll run them on our site, right? But within 3 weeks, he had 100% coverage of football games in South Jersey, right? So that's what I mean. So if you could just try it, like take anything, every meeting, every school, every game, right? Every block. And instead of starting with the limited resources you have, and how can I cover this big community with the 3 people, you know, just go the other way. Start from 100 and say, well, maybe I can get 60%, you know. And it's just like a trick of the mind to get us out of this sort of impoverished situation that the shrinking resources of the daily newspaper have left us in. You see what I mean?
I just want to clarify a couple things. I think journalism is better for community participation, and I think the experts are out in the community, and that's what we're all about. And so getting to great journalism is, again, not only using the talents of journalists, trained journalists, but making sure that those trained journalists are open and offer people, everybody in the community, opportunity to participate and make the journalism better. So that's the foundation of where I'm coming from with quality. I also, though, think that we don't necessarily have to cover the State House or cover, you know, the town council, because maybe the reason all of those newspapers shrunk is because those were boring stories and the headlines were awful, and, you know, people need that information. They need the information, but they don't necessarily need it in the format that we've been shoving down their throats for such a long time. And with that, I want to turn it over to Joel, who we talked 2 minutes before this and was talking about his state coverage. So can you explain that?
Sure.
Tell me where to go.
Okay, go to stateimpact.npr.org/Indiana.
It's so fun to be able to do this.
So this is a site that doesn't officially launch until tomorrow, but
you heard it
so
here
you can
first.
get a preview here. Excuse me, till Monday. But again, this is part of the project where we're starting out with 8 states, hiring 2 reporters in each state. We have a lead station, and then we have other stations that are also involved, either providing resources or carrying the stories on air and linking to the websites. And again, it's very much about what's happening in the state, and we're also a very important component to this site, all of these sites, and I think that's something that even at the local level you really, really need to take a hard look at is data reporting. We hired a guy called Matt Stiles, who was the database reporter at the Texas Tribune, who derived 75% of its traffic from database stories. And you know, they didn't start with infinite resources, and it's something that once you either have the expertise in-house or start to gain some of it, you know, it's the stories that keep on giving, right? It's data that continues to tell a story over a period of time. One example in this case, they took a look at this is about education in the state of Indiana. They took a look at, well, you know, who exactly is making policy in the state of Indiana? And there's this board that is probably not well known to most of the population. Can you scroll down just a little bit for me? A little bit further. A little more. Yep, there it is. Meet the board behind tuition increases. So this is a big story in Indiana, right? All the tuition increases at the state level. So using Matt and the reporter there in Indiana, we took a look at exactly exposing who's on this board and a little bit about their background, what kind of contributions, political contributions, and we found that a number of them are big contributors to Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana. And so we're not necessarily drawing A-B conclusions here, but exposing, like, this is who's behind these tuition increases. So again, not incremental State House reporting, but very much about the policy made at the state level and how it affects our daily lives. Cool. One other thing I want to second about that Jay said just a minute ago is, so the last two organizations I've worked for, NPR and USA Today, infinite resources, right? Well, not exactly. I mean, back in as late as 2000, 2001, USA Today, the print newsroom, didn't have a great deal of interest of the .com section of the company, and so it was very much about how can we cover everything with very few resources, and so we started a breaking news blog there on deadline to do just that. One person to sort of look at the world and cover it, and you start to think of things in a different way. Same thing at NPR, right? You had a newsroom that did not produce copy fit to print. It was all about audio, so they started the two-way blog, which was taking a look at everything that was produced on the air and also in aggregate the world around us and starting to look at that. So starting at that, you figure out what you can do well, what kind of community participation you can get, and sort of how to innovate on that.
Great. Come on up, Benjamin.
I don't need to come up, I don't think.
Well, talk.
Yeah. I don't know enough about
Say who
this.
you are.
Benjamin Meadows Ingram. I work at Billboard magazine. I don't own a hyperlocal anything at this point. But I've been interested in what Columbia is doing. I know that's kind of, they launched that data initiative. I don't know enough about it at this point. I just saw that it was launching. Does anybody here, can someone talk about that? Or is anyone familiar with what I'm talking about? Because I don't remember the name off top.
The New Columbia Project, you mean?
It's like a data aggregate they're culling all the data for New York City, and then they're going to try to build stories around this data.
Exactly.
And, I mean, I think that's a really interesting idea, to your point. I think that, in my experience, like, I think that I've worked in magazines, mostly consumer magazines, during my career, and I think that level of looking at the big picture and pulling that all together into a way that's digestible to the user or the reader, like, this is something that I find professionals do a lot, or something that people who are really spending a lot of time, excuse me, thinking about one particular subject can bring to the table, whether on a hyperlocal level or on a national level or whatever it is.
So developing that expertise is very difficult, right? Because you can look at data sets and it can, without being able to normalize the data and to make it valid, you can make a lot of bad assumptions and leap judgments. But I will say there are a lot of organizations that are already doing that. Pew is one that does a lot of that kind of in-depth at the state level, and I think in some cases beyond. So trying to figure out what nonprofits, what other organizations in your area are really doing that heavy lifting that you can then analyze in a little bit easier way. Just using general reporting skills is probably something worth exploring.
Come on, Francis.
I just want to piggyback on that, talking about partnerships and using what other people have done. In the Bay Area, there's something called the Center for Investigative Reporting, which started a new project about 18 months ago called California Watch, which is nonprofit. And California Watch has this interesting distribution model. It collects money from foundations in order to do its investigative reporting, but it shares its content over as many platforms as possible, selling it for very little. So it'll sell it to KQED, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Orange County Register, and it sells it to local blogs, or gives it to local blogs. And they recently did a big examination of earthquake safety of school buildings. And as you can imagine, in California, that's a big issue. And of course, what they discovered was that there were many buildings that were not up to code. And they found out that there was actually a fund of state money to improve these buildings, but because of strange mechanics, people weren't accessing this money. And so California Watch shared this with everyone, including Berkeley side, and we were able to localize the story as everyone else did. And so it was actually had much more impact than just one news organization, doing a study. And I think this is the trend. Certainly, California is sharing. Like Berkeley side is partners with the Bay Citizen, which is a new nonprofit news site. We're about to announce a partnership with KQED. We also put our stuff on the San Francisco Chronicle. We have a revenue sharing agreement with their SF Gate. But the idea is to sort of magnify what you do many times out, because one of the problems with being a hyperlocal and when you are doing good journalism is you have a limited audience. And I think lots of times a story about a small town has larger relevance and larger interest. And so how do you get that information out there? And so that's one of the things that we think a lot about, and we work hard on. Of course, there's Twitter and Facebook, but I'd be curious to hear how other people try to amplify their message.
Why don't we spend a few minutes on that, and then the last 10 minutes on metrics, which I think, how do you measure engagement? What is engagement? What's meaningful? What's not meaningful? But let's answer Francis's question first. Anyone have a response? Anybody? Who said that? Tim? Tim thinks it's brilliant. I think so too.
It's recognizing the limitations of hyperlocal being a small universe and amplifying it through partnerships. You look at things like Gothamist, which has San Franciscoist, which has Bostonist, which has DCist. They can get behind one particular and engage.
Sure. Or localize, as she was saying, localizing more massive information to a specific locale's actual interests and see what the specifics are.
It's recognizing your own limitations.
Sure. Come on up. But don't trip yourself.
Hi, my name is Melissa, and I write for nycreligion.info. It's a web magazine that reports on religious growth all around the city of New York. So what we did to engage in civil discourse, civil dialogue, was tackle issues like the mosque controversy of last year, for example. We had asked religious leaders of all around the city to contribute op-ed articles for our website, and that actually helped.
Give me the URL. Sorry.
Oh, sure. It's nycreligion.info, I-N-F-O.
.com?
No, .info.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
yep.
Thanks.
And that actually helped with our viewership numbers. We started in July of 2010, and 2 months ago we just reached our 1 millionth viewer. So, it's actually really helped with just getting people onto our website and increasing comments. Also, we struggle with the whole quality versus quantity type of factor, especially with limited resources, staffing, etc. And we realized that more people were staying on our website with longer articles, and so we had decided to allocate our resources according to having more series of the topic, And I really liked your Common Health website, because we're not only hyperlocal, but we're also hyper topic, which is something that's not really looked into.
Great. Chelsea, come on up.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Marcius. I'm a grad student at NYU, and I write for the Local East Village. And one question I have for things like where you said you partner with California Watch, is there ever a concern from a journalistic perspective that by partnering with one place that's supplying you data, that you're maybe not seeing other data, you know what I mean? Like, do you ever feel an obligation to them because they're your partner to use their data sets, when I think it's good as a journalist to look at multiple data sets from multiple different places, that sort of thing. Just as we're talking about these limited resources, it's like you want to be able to.
Well, I don't know if you're asking the question, can you trust the source of your statistics and whether that's an issue. And I would say normally you have to be very wary where you get information from. And this goes back to a point that Jim Schachter brought up. Do you have people in the community feeding you sort of investigative stuff? And we often get people sending us information, you know, purporting to have the real story on things. The problem is that it's very hard to necessarily trust that information. We found it's not always that accurate. California Watch is a very different kettle of fish. It's a very sophisticated news organization with top reporters from around the country. And the investigation into the school safety took more than a year. So that's the kind of information that, you know, of course we felt we could trust. But I think you have to, you know, be wary where you get information. Do we go to them every time for a data set? No, this was just one particular situation.
Thank you. Any other comments on that? Can we move to, oh, sorry, come on up.
Hi, so what we found in our method of reporting is that we collect data as we report. So we're not only just a web magazine doing reporting and writing, but we're also a think tank. And so we're actually doing a religious survey as well, so we take note and numbers of every religious site that we see when we're doing that district or that you know, that neighborhood. So we're collecting data as we go along and doing reporting. So it's a little unconventional, but it's doable.
Thanks. How about how we measure participation? Is there any tried and true way to do that? Has anyone come up with a system or a plan? Or is it, gosh, the comment streams are shallow? Sometimes I notice, you know, if there's 57 comments, it's really 5 people talking. So I wonder how reliable that is. Page views, uniques. I know that if, you know, Gawker mentions us, we get 10 times as many as normal. I'm not sure that's a measure of how well we're doing. I wish someone would, I wish several of you would speak to that, and I speak frankly. How are we all doing?
Well, you have some suggestions on this subject as well, but I've created Excel sheets that measure a whole bunch of things across our portfolio of 50 sites. So, you know, we have population by town, average page views over the last 6 months by town, you know, I update pretty regularly, you know, current page views by month for the month that we're in. And then I have Facebook likes, I have Twitter followers, what else? You know, there's some advertising stuff on there, and so that's like one thing. The other way I do it is I look at the page views. I have a user-generated content or a community contribution Excel sheet that looks at, you know, what's working. Yeah, I mean, essentially that's the ultimate lesson is like what's working. But I mean, I look at the audience response from the different categories and methods that we're using for user engagement. You know, and it helps me understand, frankly, what's working. It also helps me understand which of the 50 sites are the strongest. You know, it helps me measure it against the population, because I know that a community that has a relatively low population is arguably not going to generate as much news and as much engagement. That's not always true, but that's one lesson. You know, and I also, you know, measure each town by the types of additional layers of attention that we're giving it to. If every single one of the 50 sites has an auto tweet system, it does. how many of those 50 sites do I have enough resources to actually have a human, interactive person working the Twitter account? How many how many sites do I have somebody who can put yet another layer on in terms of, face-to-face marketing? So that's a measurement tool in terms of a management tool in terms of how I kind of display my resources as well. So.
Good. Others? Come on up and tell us about them without giving up the secret sauce.
Oh, well, we're open about our page views. The New Haven Independent gets about 100,000 unique visitors a month. And we use Expression Engine. We're not on WordPress. And you can actually see every time you look at the story how many people have read it. So we track pretty closely, okay, in the first hour, is the story taking off or is it kind of dull? And that'll sort of change our placement throughout the day where we keep the story. But by far our biggest measure of success on a story is the quality of the comment section. Not the number of comments, but really are we getting a diverse sort of array of opinions? Are we getting a high sort of sophisticated level of discussion here? And we moderate all our comments, so before a comment sees the light of day, we look at every one of them and we delete quite a few and we actually censor them. So our site is really known for the lively and sophisticated comment section. We use Google Analytics to sort of look at page views, but we really are more about engagement, the discussion that's resulted. That story is really long. But so yeah, we're not huge on the metrics, but it's a qualitative assessment of what's going on down there. It's really the heart of our site.
Just a question on how much staff and resources does it take to moderate all the comments and, maybe in a percentage of time devoted to the whole operation?
So we have 4 people, 2 editors and 2 reporters who do comments. So if you're if you're a reporter filing a story at night, then your job is to moderate the comments while you're doing that. I don't know, I would say probably an hour of our collective time per day, maybe, an hour or 2. It's a lot of time, but we've really, sure. It really has been something that's made our site stand out, is the quality of those comments and people not feeling safe in that space and feeling like a diverse array of people can take part.
I can't resist talking about comments because Berkeley side has a really lively comment section. Berkeley is such an opinionated city, as Dave Weiner can attest. And we have been moderating our comments, but lately we noticed that, and many people, I would say the vast majority, don't use their real name. And just last week we had an aide to a city councilman come on and start to talk, and he got viciously attacked by people. Berkeley is a city that is made up of people who are on the left and people who are up on the further left. And so this guy was maybe not sufficiently left. And anyway, it got to the point where we really felt bad. I felt bad going on my site and looking at these comments. I mean, I think comments are the best measurement of how engaged your community is. And we decided to ban a number of commenters. And we put up a post saying that we were going to do this. And it was, the response was tremendous. I mean, there were many people who were just absolutely flabbergasted that we would do this. They were saying that, Berkeley side was becoming the tool of the politicians and we weren't allowing a certain amount of dialogue. Other people were very, very thankful about it because, the internet is such a place that you can go and say something innocent and you will be attacked. And I think that this is one of the hardest parts of running a local site is balancing this community contribution and having it to be a place for civil discourse, which I think is what makes these sites really important and creates community, and having it be a free-for-all. And I don't think there's an easy answer.
Come on, Todd. Here's one.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Todd Olmstead. I'm a grad student at NYU. I work for the local East Village, and I also work for Mashable. So those are 2 very different sites, very different presences, and really different communities. And one question that I hope you can answer for me, but I also would like to open it up, is about how long it takes for these like comment communities to develop. Yeah, I think you said you guys have been about 6 years. And that's something that we definitely have at Mashable and don't yet have at the local East Village, except for a couple stories that have sort of sparked an interest in communities. So sort of what you've done to foster that environment and how long it took to get there and what was successful, and yeah.
Please.
Well, I had a bunch of comments, specifically in response to the question of whether it's all about journalism. And maybe from one point of view it is, but from another point of view it's all about blogging. And I don't know where Jay is. Jay asked that very good question of how do you get to 100%? And it calls for an answer that is not going to come out of just thinking about things the way you guys have been thinking about them. You have to become a blogging platform to get there. You have to open, and I thought this was, you know, this might have been the answer. I mean, I used to live in Berkeley, and so I know exactly what you're talking about, right? I mean, Berkeley is both a very inspiring, interesting place and also a crazy place. I mean, there are crazies in Berkeley, but there are also some very, very opinionated people, and that's the stuff out of which a hyperlocal site is made out of, is people with opinions that are founded in some, you know, in some way on reality. And so one of the things I would have thought about possibly doing when you hit this wall is saying, why not make Berkeley Side a blogging platform for Berkeley and give a blog to anybody who wants one. You know, so john.berkeleyside.com. And let them write whatever they want there. You know, they have to get the flow for it. And I dealt with this problem very early on scripting.com, which is my blog, was one of the first blogs. And I had a discussion group, and it was great for the first year. Everybody was, oh, this is wonderful, you know, love what you're doing. And then it started flaming out, like they all do. And I said, well, if you don't stop flaming, I'm just going to shut it down. And no, they flamed about that. So I did. And what my thinking was is if I shut it down, and also gave them all the software they needed to blog. And that's where the first round of bloggers came from, was by shutting down the comments in my thing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, Franny, when your comments become out of control. It might be a sign that you're ready for the next level of growth. But you have to be thinking not just journalism, because you're never going to get big and you're never going to cover everything by just thinking journalism. And if you look around at the thing, like Coase, for example, a great thinker, great visionary, creative guy. He did exactly the same thing. He said, you know, I'm not so concerned about journalism. What I want is great stories. So he let anybody have, he called them diaries, not blogs. But it ended up being more or less the same thing. There was one other point I wanted to, now that I have the mic, is that communities have big issues. It's not just about restaurants. I'm glad you came back, the Times guy, because it's not just about restaurants and movies and stuff like that. Like the East Village, what are the issues in the East Village? Gentrification, big issue here. You know, the culture, the character of the community is being lost. The history of this area. This is an old city and an old part of an old city, and you can't tell because the buildings are being torn down. Bike lanes, another big issue. I'm a biker. I love to bike. It's dangerous biking in New York. People get killed here all the time riding bikes. But then there are just as many people who hate bikers because bikers are very, you know. So these are not small issues. These are things people have very strong opinions about, and the non-hyperlocals are never going to get around to covering these things. They might run one article every once in a while, but the East Village bloggers can be writing about them all the time, and they do. And I don't think their articles are, I mean, East Village Local is journalism, I grant you that, but a lot of the others are not. But they're just fine. It works great, so my own opinion.
Thank you, Dave. This is Scripting News. Thank you for the tout. Thank you for the tout. Go ahead, Melissa.
To Todd's question, how long did it take for our comment section to kick off? Our site launched in September 2005. I think the next summer, in June of the next year, there was a pair of homicides of two 13-year-old just bystanders who were killed by stray bullets. And it was really a time when the community came together and really had a soul searching about youth violence in New Haven. And it was that time also was a turning point for our site, where we really found that the comment section, no longer was just sort of policy wonks loving our stories about City Hall and decision makers. We really found that people from these poor families of the victims were writing in, and people from City Hall who were decision makers were writing in, and folks from nearby neighborhoods who maybe don't ever interact with someone who's, in one of these families that had lost their child. They were suddenly writing into and meeting in this new space that we had created. So I think it took maybe 9-10 months for that to happen. We just launched a separate site in the Naugatuck Valley. It's 5 working class mill towns outside New Haven that had lost their daily papers about 17 years ago. And they found a whole different thing out there. They had trouble getting commenters at first, and they found that Facebook has really taken off for them. So while they have almost very few comments on their actual website, they have a ton of comments on Facebook, and people just are writing them in, almost they want them to be on their site, but they're on Facebook. I think it's sort of a cultural difference of the two geographic areas. But it doesn't have to be in your comment section. It could be on Twitter, on Facebook. I think the point is that the relationship with the readers and building that rapport.
Very easy to make Facebook your comment site.
Right.
We can talk more of that under tools, because we're getting to the end here. But RVA News, right?
Yeah, I think comments are maybe a bad way to measure engagement, at least for us. I think practically.
Is it rvanews.com?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, yeah, .com. I think it's like if you get 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 really great comments, then it's great, it's parsable as a human. But if you get 150, even if you have 150 really great comments, if you're a reader and you come to the site and try to get through 150 comments and like try to parse this huge discussion, I just don't think it works. I don't think people really want to delve into the way comments, especially visually, are designed at the moment. We're not going to take them away. We have a big, giant, not nested list, but it's not the best way, I don't think, to measure what's going on. I like Facebook a lot, not necessarily as, I don't want to put my comments on Facebook, like he said. I think that's a terrible idea, but I like it as a way of measuring what's going on, how many people have liked your story, how many people are talking about your story in Twitter, on Facebook. I think the real measure for engagement is how many more stories have come out of the story you did. If your story, you ran a story and someone emailed you or someone did leave an insightful comment, and now you have 2, 3, 4 more stories that came out of that, that's a great measure of the engagement that you got going on. A great example is we have an abandoned black cemetery in the east end of our city. And I mean, it's really abandoned, like vines everywhere. You just go into the forest and there's graves everywhere. And every once in a while we'll do photos of it and stuff. And there was a big, long conversation about whatever. But some lady from New York saw a picture of her ancestor's grave in this big photo essay we did, and emailed the site's editor, and came down from New York and went to the actual graveyard. And then now that story, the story of that visit and what it meant to her, that's like it's a much better, much more interesting story, and it kind of shows the engagement better than comments, I think.
Well, we have to shut this down, but I'm sure these subjects will bleed into the next 2, because it's all kind of mushy. So how did it work with no panel? Worked? Yeah. We're okay with this? Okay, we're going to keep it going. So we'll see you. What's our next time slot? Somebody have that in front of them? 15 minutes? 5 minutes? Oh, take 10 minutes. No, we need at least 10 minutes. Take 10 minutes, and then we'll come back here and go right into money.